was interesting just hearing the conversation beforehand about what careers everybody had before coming into property. So my background is marketing, sales and management consultancy. So I have managed brands like drinks brands like Chivas Regal Whiskey, Martell Cognac, Captain Morgan Rum, and champagne brands like Krug champagne, one of the finest champagnes that you can get, and Charles Heidsieck champagne. So I didn't have a background in property, so a lot of what I'm talking about is self-taught. I'm pretty well travelled. I think I've done most of the continents across the globe. I also speak French. My degree is a joint major marketing in French, so I used to use French a lot during my working career. I used to be fluent, but not so much now because I don't use it in quite the same way. Although having said that, I did manage a conversation with a French notary in French a few months back. But I have had some of my quirkiest moments in France using French. I used to sell G-strings along the Côte d'Azur before I went to university over a number of summers. And one particular challenging aspect was when I entered a nudist beach. And trying to sell G-strings on a nudist beach, well, you know, you can either think about it as glass half full or glass half empty. I seized the moment. Another time when I've had a quirky moment speaking in French was when I was a management consultant. I had to do a pan-European research project for BP, and so I drove from east to west across France interviewing engineers about their lubricant usage, which was really rather an interesting thing. So I set up my property business in 2007. That coincided with buying my buy-to-let in Krakow. The two went hand in hand, and I'll explain the reasons why. So various pictures of me over there. The one here with me with a hard hat on, and here me on site, about me doing due diligence. This one here is a road trip in the UK when I was going and checking out various properties that I've been promoting, and that was in the Midlands and up in the Yorkshire. I quite often do that, go and check out things, make sure that what I'm being told about progress is actually happening. And here, the one beneath that one's checking out a development on Ile de Ré in France. So I do both UK and other countries. Other pictures here of me speaking on a panel there at one of Brendan Quinn's events. That was his Wandsworth one, and speaking here. And here, presenting at the NLA, what was then called the National Landlords Association, talking about all things European. What do I do? Well, I've got a property firm, which is an award-winning boutique firm that helps busy business people buy retirement homes or holiday homes in continental Europe. Focus countries for me are France, Spain. Poland is a bit more of a niche market, but I help people buy in Poland. And interestingly, I'm having a lot more conversations about people who want to buy in Portugal. My company is fully compliant, a member of the PRS, the Property Redress Scheme, for investors who are buying in the UK. And over here on the left, the AIPP, the Association of International Property Professionals, which is the overseas industry body. So I'm not only a member, but I also sit on the advisory board of the AIPP. So I'm quite well networked and have quite a number of professional contacts in my network. Won an award a few years back for Best Boutique Property Firm, which was the OPP Awards for Excellence. So that's one strand to my business, helping busy business people buy in continental European countries. But I also have another strand to my business. I help time-strapped expats abroad invest in UK property, and that's usually buy-to-let. I have a wide connection of developers, and I can offer developer deals and help with resales, mainly in the home counties, because I'm based in Surrey. So I can help there. I also have some commercial opportunities like students, and I've been offered recently some interesting industrial units, which are quite interesting as well. When I set up my business, as an outsider looking in, I saw lots of companies and individuals who were very much about product push. So they had a product or a property to sell, and that was what they were going to sell no matter what. And I kind of thought that I could bring something a bit different to the sector and offer a slightly more consultative style, bringing together my management consultancy skills and finding out what clients want and then trying to match that with a product or an offering that I have. So it's about matching product with client needs rather than just product push. I like to think that I bring a little bit of EQ, emotional intelligence, to the buying process as well as the thought process. So how do I do it? My business model. When I first started out, I focused very much on PR, getting a lot of press coverage, and that's helped me a lot, and I've sold properties off of the back of that. So in 9 years, I got over 70 pieces of press coverage. So that's national press, Sunday Times, Guardian, Telegraph, Daily Mail, also trade press, like A Place in the Sun. So that has helped me, when I first started my business, raise the profile of the business, quite often get quoted for commentary on overseas property markets, and I say have sold off of the back of that. Social media, my focus on social media at the outset was Twitter for reach and to hang out with journalists. Journalists very much hang out on Twitter, so if you're looking to get press coverage, that's a good place to be. LinkedIn, I've tended to use over the years for professional intermediaries and connections, and some expats check out profiles on there to make sure that you are who you say you are and you've got some credibility. Facebook for me has been very much about engagement, and expats are in lots and lots of groups on Facebook, which is a good place for my business to be. And Instagram, I'm more recently on Instagram, and that's you lovely ladies, the social female connection. I've found that a wonderfully supportive place to be. So I've come into Instagram a little bit after the other social media channels that I've been on. And I have a YouTube channel. I post quite a lot of videos on there too. So my case example. So this is a modest example. It's a one-bed apartment in Krakow. It's important to say, back in 2007, I decided I wanted to get on the property ladder. And at that time, I was considering investing in the UK, and a deal came across my desk in Krakow. So I was looking at the Stratford area. If you remember the London 2012 Olympics, the property market around there was quite active in the Stratford area. So I went and had a look at a number of properties. But what frightened me as a first-time investor was the price point, the entry-level price point. And for some, it might seem a bit wacky, investing abroad as a first-time investor rather than trying out in the UK first and then venturing abroad. But actually, I did my due diligence, I'd seen the deal, seen the numbers, and went to check it out. So I felt more comfortable with it. And for me, it was a lower entry price point, considerably less than buying in the UK and certainly in the London area. And for me, I felt more comfortable with that. So that's why I ended up buying in Krakow. Now, I know a lot of you lovely ladies are very good at, really glamorous HMOs and staging. So this is quite modest. At the time, I wasn't good with staging, but I have cobbled together some photos just so you can see what it looks like. So on the left is the building. This top right apartment there is our apartment. It's in the eaves of it's a roof top apartment, so it's in the eaves of the roof. Here's sort of kitchen lounge area, bed area, and the bathroom. So I mentioned I bought it in 2007. It was an old tenement building, so an old house, and I do love that kind of a development, smaller developments rather than big high-rise apartments. For me, it's got more character and it's much easier to let because you're not competing with lots of investors at the same time trying to rent out their properties at the same time. It's in a suburb just on the outskirts of Bonaviki. At the time was an up-and-coming suburb, and indeed it has become more buoyant since. When we bought, it was at the end of the tram line. It was a 7-minute journey into the centre of Krakow. Indeed, since then, the tram line has been extended further out to the airport, so our apartment has benefited from some of that infrastructure improvement. It's right near a main road where there are lots of international, multinational firms. And in fact, a number of our tenants have come from IBM and some of those multinational companies. So buying in Poland is a very different process to buying in the UK. It's a notarized buying process. And for many of you, you'll probably be aware of what a notary is, but rather than using a solicitor or a lawyer, it's a notary. And a notary is a legal representative bestowed with special powers by the government. They like to ensure that they collect all of the relevant property taxes during the buying process, and that's what a notary does. It's been important to get the right letting agent as well. Our ideal tenants were professionals and still are professionals. There was at one stage where we did let out to students. I mean, Krakow is a huge university city, very, very well educated population. So there are lots and lots of students, but also lots of professional workers. So I know you all love a bit of before and after, so I sort of scrambled around trying to see if I could find some before and after pictures. This is during the build process, gaining airspace. So if you look on the picture below, this is just when the property was finished, but it looked more like this sort of rundown building here. This is back in 2007. Since all of these buildings have been done up, so it looks a lot nicer now. So this was the grabbing airspace. And in the map down below, you can see here is Krakow, which is the, I could rave about Krakow for absolutely ages. I love it as a city. You can see the Stare Miasto, which is the old square, and our apartment is just out in the suburbs, which is perfect for a long-term buy-to-let. If you want to do more serviced accommodation, short-term lets, then you probably do need to be more central. But it's worked really well, our strategy for us. Interesting fact about Krakow is that it has the biggest, oldest medieval square in, which is still the original in Europe. It was the only city main square that didn't get bombed in the wars, and that's because the Germans based themselves there, and so they didn't want to bomb themselves. So if you go to Warsaw, the main square in Warsaw has been rebuilt. If you go to Krakow, you get the real McCoy. It really is a beautiful square. So you can see originally it was a very grubby exterior. I remember showing this image to a friend of mine who lived in Hong Kong, who hadn't got into property investing at that time, and she was horrified that I was going to be buying this building that looked so awful, but luckily it doesn't look awful anymore. It was in an up-and-coming neighbourhood, end of the tram line, which has now been extended to the airport. Now, there are some things that are similar. We bought this apartment right near an IKEA, and as many of you probably use IKEA as part of your furnishings, we did the same. So we had a weekend sleeping on the floor, going and buying IKEA furniture and furnishing it. Some more images of Krakow there. I mentioned that I bought it at the same time as setting up my business. For me, it's important to put my money where my mouth is, and I felt that it was important to have gone through the buying experience, which would then give me the experience and make me better informed to help others buy in the same way. So that was why I did both things in conjunction. It was also at the time that I was trying to get press coverage, so it was my first piece of press coverage in 2010. This picture appeared in the Daily Mail of us at Valval Castle. That was on one of the weekends we were going and doing the buying. That was the headline of the article, because what I was writing about was Poland's economy, which has been a very buoyant economy, and it was the only economy, I think, not to have gone into recession in 2007, the only European economy that didn't go into recession. And the other two pictures are when I went and did an inspection trip with my daughter. We were trying to replicate the image there of my husband, but that is actually in the medieval square in Krakow. And what some people don't realize is that you can offset against tax inspection trips, reasonable inspection trips. So if you're going on an annual trip to check out your investment, that is allowable tax-wise. I will say I am not a tax advisor. Anything that I say about tax is in layman's terms and what I've picked up. So just to go through some of the buy-to-let differences. What are the things that are the same? Well, the things that work both in the UK and in Poland are having clear investment criteria. We had that. We wanted a long-term buy-to-let, and that's what we looked out for. We also had an exit strategy, and that also influenced the modest nature of what we bought. At the time, the market was not quite as international as it is now, and I was very conscious of wanting to be able to sell to the local professional market as well as to the international market. And if you get seduced by doing or buying lots of luxurious or a very luxurious apartment, it kind of narrows the options open to you for selling on. Due diligence, critically important. You still have to do that. And even more important when you're buying abroad, because there are other considerations if you're not familiar with the country or the property market or the economy. Yeah, doing inspection trips, the same. And looking out for infrastructure improvements in the same way as you would do investing in the UK. That's what we did. We're looking at the tram line, looking at the up and coming area, and that was important for us in our choice. Finding good tenants is important. You're one step further removed. I use a good local agent, but I still keep on top of things, and they need to understand what your criteria are for your tenants. And over the years, they've proved very good judges of character, which I've come to rely on. But in the same way as in the UK, you get good and bad tenants. What I've tended to do over the years is find my tenants on LinkedIn and hook up with them. And I find that that gives me another avenue, another communication channel to make sure that things are running smoothly, and for them just as an escalation route should they want to. And I haven't been bombarded with messages, but it has been useful. In fact, one of my previous tenants contacted me via LinkedIn and asked me when I was selling the property because he was interested in buying. So I almost sold the buy-to-let on LinkedIn. Property regulation, same as in the UK, it's about being familiar with the property regulation locally. So what's different is the buying process. I've mentioned about the notary. It's not like in the UK where you have a solicitor where you can sign the documentation and a solicitor can exchange and complete for you with you not being present. You have to go along and visit the notary in person, or if you can't go in person to sign the documentation, you need to have a power of attorney in place. And because the whole process is conducted in Polish, you also have to have a sworn translator, an official translator, who is recognised by notaries and the relevant officials in the buying process, who can translate everything to make sure you know what you are signing. Property appreciation is not always the same as it is in the UK. I think in the southeast of the UK, we get very used to very buoyant property prices. In Krakow, the property appreciation has been a bit more modest on an annual basis, 3 to 5%. It's not the dizzying heights of the southeast, but certainly we know that in areas of the UK, you don't get dizzying appreciation figures. The laws are different. So in Poland, it's a republic. It has a statute and a civil code which operates the property rules and regulations. But there are some similarities, and I've mentioned statute of limitations there because I had a problem with two professional tenants, a doctor and a lawyer, and they decided they weren't going to pay their gas bill. They decided that I had taken too long, it was about 3 or 4 weeks, to let them know of the size of the bill and that they needed to pay it. So they decided, because I hadn't let them know swiftly enough, I think 3 or 4 weeks is actually not bad, but because I hadn't let them know swiftly enough, that entitled them to not pay. Now in the UK, I know there is a statute of limitation, which means even if you haven't invoiced or let someone know about a debt, you have a 6-year grace period. So it means that within that 6 years, that debt is still live. It still has to be paid. So I just thought, well, there must be something similar in Poland, did a bit of research, and the equivalent does exist in Poland. There is a statute of limitations, although the time period is different. The equivalent is 3 years rather than 6 years. So I got my letting agent to translate my email, and given that one of them was a lawyer, she went and sought advice, but then came back and paid the bill. In Poland, it's quite unusual because in the UK we're used to leasehold apartments. In a lot of continental countries in Europe, you have freehold apartments. I like freeholds. So you get a portion of the underlying land that the apartment sits on. So it's a different concept for British buyers, but it's relatively common in a lot of continental countries. You'll see that there's significantly less regulation in Poland on a later chart that I've got for you. Obviously, the property has to be safe. There are gas safety regulations, but nowhere near the amount of regulations that there are here in the UK. There are less tenant checks. It's not likely that you're going to be able to inquire and delve too much into the financial health of the tenant. It's just not culturally acceptable to do. You wouldn't get like an Experian report as you would do here in the UK, which is why it's more important to make sure you're happy with the tenant before they move in and that you've got a good letting agent. It's important to take into account culture. I don't know whether you remember the picture of the bathroom. What I didn't point out is that there's the washing machine is in the bathroom. And again, that is something that I found a bit odd. I wasn't sure whether I was having the wool pulled over my eyes, but it is very common. In Poland, it's much more culturally acceptable to have the washing machine in the bathroom rather than in the kitchen or utility room. Tax. Now, tax in Poland is different. Whenever you're buying abroad, if you are using it as a commercial enterprise, you have to complete a local tax return and report that in your UK tax return. Most of the European countries, continental European countries, have a double taxation treaty with the UK, and it means that you don't pay tax twice. So anything that you declare and pay in the local country is offset against any tax liability that you are due in the UK. So talking of tax, I come on to a very interesting chart. And again, I want to compare a number of countries so you can see the differences between the UK and other continental countries. What I am about to say again is I am not a tax advisor. This is not advice. This is me trying to simplify a very complex situation. So the chart I'm about to show you has got loads of information on, and I will try and explain what it all means. So this, on the left-hand side, are 5 countries, and then across the top are different dimensions against which I rate them. Now I can spend ages explaining this chart, but I won't spend too long given the time frames here. But what you'll see is a lot of different sort of complete and incomplete circles. What that means is the fuller the circle, this is from my management consultancy days. It's called a booze chart from Booz Allen Consultancy, and it does help simplify very complex information. So the fuller the circle, or the more whole the circle, the higher the country rates against that particular dimension. So the less complete the circle, the lower it rates against that dimension. So just to highlight a few things. Personal taxation level, the first column here. You can see that Poland has got quite a light tax regime compared with France. I have taken just the nominal headline rate of taxation, the lower rate band and the higher rate band. I haven't taken into account all personal allowances. But what you'll see here is nominally France appears to be the highest personal taxation country out of those listed there. But there are ways, if you're looking at investing in property, that you can mitigate that tax position by a number of schemes that France has, which encourage people to invest for the long term. On the corporation tax level, you'll see that again, Poland ranks really well there. It's got quite a light touch taxation regime. It has one of the lowest corporation tax rates along with the UK. But what makes it more light touch is it also offers a lower concessionary rate for smaller companies, which I think is quite a nice idea. Germany is quite high on taxation there. It not only has corporation tax, but also it has things like solidarity charges, which make it a bit more burdensome for companies operating there. In terms of landlord regulation, I put a full circle for the UK because I think that we as investors and landlords sometimes find the regulation and red tape a bit onerous. I've alluded to the fact that Poland has quite light touch regulation in terms of compliance, and France, Germany and Spain are, I've considered, relatively similar in terms of their regulation levels. I tried to take a stab at looking at capital growth and yields across those countries, but it's kind of difficult to do because there are regional variations in the same way in those countries as there are in the UK. Suffice it to say that a number of those countries like France, Germany, Poland haven't tended to experience the same dizzy heights of capital growth that we see in the southeast of the UK. Spain has been a bit boom and bust with some of its Costa property prices from 2007. And there are places like Paris and along the Costa, along the Côte d'Azur, where some of the cities are very buoyant in price terms. And Germany, there are some cities like Munich where prices have risen quite strongly. This is a column about EU fund or recipient. Why is that of interest? Well, it gives an idea about where EU funds are going in terms of improving infrastructure in the country. So the UK, till the end of this year, is a net funder, so F means funder, alongside France and Germany into the EU coffers. Poland and Spain are net recipients. It's quite interesting that Spain is in there. The data used for this is quite a few years old, so I don't know whether that might have changed for Spain since the data was released. But Poland is a net recipient of EU funds, and a lot of those funds have gone into improving the infrastructure in terms of the roads and the railway network, and that's good news for investors. The grist to the mill of the investment market is finance. So on some of these dimensions, countries score either high or low. It has to be said, the challenge of getting finance in the UK, it is actually a lot easier, and the UK has a very sophisticated buy-to-let financial market in terms of the mortgage market. A lot of other countries don't have the same buy-to-let mortgages in the same way that the UK does. So it's important to know that the mortgage market is not as flexible. They don't offer the same products, but there are some good products out there. France is pretty good on the mortgage side. It offers some quite interesting products, long-term, very low rates. So it's always worth looking at a French mortgage. Germany and Poland, it's harder. Particularly with the difference in currency. Poland doesn't much like sterling earning buyers, so it's very hard to get a mortgage for someone who's earning in sterling in Poland, unless there are family connections or you have a business there. I know that there are a lot of people I've helped buy in Krakow who do have a family connection or a business connection. It's easier for them to get a mortgage. The banking sector in Poland is very, very conservative. And in Germany, it's quite hard to, and Spain is fine, but there are some interesting products in France. Now, I'm just going to come on, having explored, comparing and contrasting different countries, give you a couple of examples of what you can do to leverage the tax position when buying in France and buying in Spain. And these are lifestyle purchases, so they're not pure investment. It's like if you want to have your cake and eat it, as we're always accused of wanting to do here in the UK. So this is an example of what you could do buying. You can either do this buying in ski resorts or a holiday home on the coast. And it's a lifestyle investment. This is an example in Les Deux Alpes. It's next to the ski lift, studios for sale. It's off plan, but it's got all the facilities there. Pricing's there. Let me just put all of the stuff up there so you can see all the dimensions. So what you can do, I mentioned that France is a very high personal tax country. If you are aware of this and you're interested in buying a new build, there are a couple of schemes on new build, which means that you can end up getting a 20% discount. So if you buy a new build property, you're basically able to claim the 20% VAT back, but it has to be a new build property. It doesn't offer the same schemes on resale properties. So what you could do if you're into skiing, but you know that you're not going to use a property all the time, but you might want to use it a couple of weeks, what you can do is have a holiday home, but know that it's paying for itself. You'll see here the yield at just over 4%. You can use it for a couple of weeks, and every week that you use it basically suppresses that yield by 0.5%. So what I found is a lot of people think, I'm going to buy a holiday home, I'm going to, use it for 6 weeks in the year, and in reality, life gets in the way. So this is a way of doing that. It's a leaseback setup, and there are developments that are around the country in France where you can buy into these schemes and get the tax offset, the VAT, 20% VAT offset against it. Depreciation. Now this is very interesting because it's not something we come across in the UK. In countries like France and in Poland, from a tax return perspective, there is a depreciation calculation built in, which means in effect, it suppresses your taxable profit. It doesn't mean to say you don't make a profit, but it suppresses the taxable profit. So my buy-to-let in Krakow, I have not paid tax in Poland because of this depreciation calculation. It means that I've made a cash profit, but I haven't made a taxable one because of that. So if you, these kind of schemes have holiday let status in the UK, so it has the more beneficial tax treatment in the UK. And there are some great mortgages in France. These tax efficient schemes are all about encouraging long-term investment. This scheme is for a 20-year period, so it is about getting people who want to seriously invest and want to hold it as a family investment, a family interest. So you can get 25-year fixed rate mortgages at around 2% fixed. Now, the loan to value at the minute is actually more like 75% than 70%, and that is due to COVID. Normally speaking, a foreign national can get up to 85% loan to value on a mortgage to buy a property like this with very low interest rates. This is an example of what you could do yourself in Spain. This is just an example of the Costa Blanca, beautiful sort of penthouse setup. It's a 3-bed, 2-bath. It's quite a pricey investment. With the VAT, it's just over €500,000. I've worked out that you could get a yield of 2 to 4.5% by setting this up yourself. If you let it out for 16 weeks, you'd get 2% yield. If you set it out for 30 weeks, you'd get more, 4.5%, but you could still use the property at the same time. So it's about having a holiday home, making it pay for itself. It would have to constitute or comply with furnished holiday let status in the UK, which means that it has to be available for at least 210 days a year as a holiday accommodation to qualify for holiday let status in the UK, but then it would have the more advantageous tax treatment. This one has parking in a shared pool. Mortgages, again, you can get decent mortgages in Spain to buy a holiday home and let it out. Not quite as advantageous as the French ones, but nevertheless, you can get some long-term fixed mortgages. But again, it's about entering into it for the long term. It's not advisable to chop and change mortgages in quite the same way as in the UK because you do incur costs, but there are some fabulous mortgage products available out there. So that should give you an idea of the difference between buying in the UK and Poland through the case example, give you some flavour of what you can do to set yourself up in the most tax efficient way if you want to buy a holiday home or a property that you might retire to at some stage. By buying new build property, there are schemes that you can use and do them yourself, DIY, but there are also some off-the-shelf schemes as well. So I'm hoping that's given you a whistle-stop canter through some of the differences between Poland, Spain and France. And they are my social media connections. If I'm not already connected with all of you on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn, I'm on there as Louise Reynolds and Property Venture on each of those things. If anyone's interested in reading a little bit more about what I have to say, I've got a downloadable investment guide there for entrepreneurs and expats, which gives a little bit more of a flavour of the kinds of things that I say. And I also have a webinar, a tax webinar coming up for expats, for those of you who want to understand how to manage your tax situation, which is going to be at the beginning of July. So if anybody's interested in attending that webinar, which is at the beginning of July, Wednesday the 6th of July, then please let me know. So that, I think, concludes the presentation. So I've cantered through. I'm hoping I've delivered some value to people, and I have no idea if there are any questions.
Very good. Thank you so much, Louise. This was